Fellow students, ladies and gentlemen, please join me in giving a warm Rowan welcome to the President of the New Jersey State Senate, the Honorable Nick Scutari.
All right, any questions? That was it. It truly is a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to say a few words and take your questions regarding politics in New Jersey. It is an interesting type of a career to go into. I didn't really fall into it directly, but after law school, it just kind of chose me. But just to talk a little bit about the political landscape here in New Jersey, obviously, I say this all the time. I think Governor Christie was the first person that really drove it home, is elections have consequences. And so this year is no different. I stand here before you because of a shocking turn of events in last year's legislative cycle, which saw the Senate President Steve Sweeney, who represented this very district so well, lost. And I can't probably say this as clearly enough, is that this country is fractured. It's pretty divided when it comes to our politics. I wouldn't say that goes for Trenton as much as it does the broader country and in Washington. But I think I find that as one of the roles as Senate President this year that I've come to being is bridging that partisan divide. And I've had many meetings with the Senate Minority Leader and Senator Oroho. Actually, I have a meeting with him tomorrow. And we meet regularly, and if you've seen many of the bills that have come up in the last 3 months, they've been generally, most of them have been bipartisan bills, and almost I think every single bill that we've passed has passed close to unanimously. So we've been looking forward to try to work together, because we know that I've never said I corner the market on good ideas or solutions, so we find those from all over. So bridging that divide and reaching across the party aisle, I think, is important. We have never seen the partisanship in Trenton in my career, that's pretty long now, as much as you see it in Washington, D.C. And I think that's a testament to the members that we have, particularly in the state Senate. We enjoy a great professional atmosphere down there amongst the senators. And so it was a real pleasure to be able to lead that house. It wasn't something that I was looking for. I think that's one of the reasons I probably got the job. Many people are making designs on these promotions year in, year out. I always said, just do the job that they have for you, do it well, and the opportunities will be there. And unfortunately, that opportunity arose, which no one, and I can tell you for myself as well, no one saw coming. We did not see Senator Sweeney losing. And that's a big loss, I think, for the 3rd Legislative District, because the people, and I've said this, in that district have no idea what they had with having the President of the New Jersey Senate from Gloucester County. It was unheard of before that an area with lesser population in South Jersey had somebody that not only resided here and not only represented that district, but was in leadership for longer than anybody had ever been in there, 12 years. And I've said this, and I've had so many conversations with Senate President Steve Sweeney since I took over. I don't have, there's no way I'm as good as he was at this point in time. When he'll tell me what to do, I'll be like, listen, I've had the job for 12 days, you had it for 12 years. I'll get there. But it is an eye-opening experience, and it's different. And so far, so good. I've had the job for about 3 months. Place hasn't burned to the ground yet. Doors are still open. Government's still functioning. So we can talk a little bit about what that agenda has been. And I think the agenda that we have put forward as leaders of the Democratic Party, which have been embraced by the leaders of the Republican Party, is that of affordability. We've seen the economy is really doing well. It's not that the economy in New Jersey is not doing well. In fact, people are earning more and more, and I think you're going to see the receipts coming in this next quarter are going to be better than people expected. But things cost more, and that's a bit of a shock to people because of the way inflation has been running. So you have two of those competing interests. People are, and I mean this in an average way, not everybody is making more than they were, but the economy is churning along, and people are making money, and we're seeing that the state coffers are being filled because people are making more and more money. But then other people and regular folks are spending more and more on products that they ordinarily hadn't. Gas, produce, eggs, you name it. things are costing more than they were. But some of the things that we've tried to do, and I'll just give you a few examples, and probably you want to talk about marijuana, since that was the thing that I'm mostly known for before I became Senate President, is my 17-year journey to get marijuana legalized, which is going to happen Thursday. This Thursday, thanks. There's a couple articles in the paper recently about this journey, and I forget about how long it really went. And I'll tell you the true story, and this goes from my current chief of staff, who wasn't my chief of staff 17 years ago. In fact, he's much younger than that. He was an intern in the freeholder office at the time, which is now county commissioner's office. When I had dinner with him and some friends, and I said, I'm going to legalize marijuana in New Jersey. And they laughed at me, literally laughed, belly laughed, like, what are you, crazy? And this is 2004 or 5. And it took that long. Even after the voters passed it by 2/3 majority, we still couldn't get the bill passed, even though we had a perfectly good bill before that. That shows you the hesitance that New Jersey had towards legalized cannabis. And that's the new word, cannabis. I can't tell you how many times I've had to tell people that cannabis and marijuana are the same thing. People think that it's different, but it's not. But on Thursday, we're going to see the first legal sales in New Jersey. It's been decriminalized for some period of time, and we're finally moving that step forward. And I'm looking forward to good things. I think that's going to be a great engine for the economy in years to come. I use alcohol as an example all the time. I'm like, what would happen to the economy if alcohol was instantaneously made illegal, when all these bars had to close and all these liquor stores had to close and all of this substance went underground and people stopped paying taxes and people stopped having jobs that they were paying payroll taxes on. So you're talking about $1 billion industry in alcohol, and I see the future for that for cannabis moving forward as we move forward into a legalized industry. And we're encouraging the Cannabis Control Commission to move quicker and faster. And I think by putting a little pressure on them a couple of weeks ago, we got them to open up. And I'm looking forward to some good things there. But a few things that I want to talk about in terms of affordability. First is S330, which is an important bill that the Senate has passed, substantially increases the amount of money distributed to municipalities from something called the Energy Tax Receipts Funds. So that would go to municipalities and require them to use those funds to reduce the property tax levy. It's not just giving them more money to spend, it's giving them that money, and it has to be given to decrease the tax levy. People say all the time, what do you do to decrease property taxes? That's the thing that you can do, is marrying those two items, not just the energy receipts tax, but making it go back directly to property taxpayers. Another bill that we've passed in the Senate is, and we haven't passed that many because we've slowed the process down, and I'll talk about that in a minute. S343, which increases the tax credit for renters from 18 to 30%. The higher deduction on gross income taxes will produce real savings for renters. That's a significant amount of money for people renting. And there's a lot of people that live in rentals. Also, S344, which is extending a grace period on mortgages if they have experienced financial hardships due to the pandemic. Those are 3 real serious pieces of legislation that the Republicans joined us in to try to help taxpayers. And I think you're going to see some version of that come forward between now and the end of the budget cycle. But these bills were measures to reach across the aisle to help financially lower the burden of COVID-19 and what happened as we come out of the pandemic and reach endemic stages. So those are some of the things that we've moved forward with. But one of the general things that we've done in this new leadership is slow the process down. And I know that some of the lobbyists and people have been very appreciative of that. Sometimes things move really fast because it's important to do it that way. But in a deliberative process and a deliberative body, which a legislature is, as an equal partner with the administrative branch and the Supreme Court, we have slowed the process down, giving legislators and lobbyists and public folks an opportunity to review the legislation that we've proposed, make appropriate changes, amendments, listen to folks in terms of what they think is good and bad about the bill, and perhaps refining the ideas to get the best possible product. And that is the idea that I brought to the job, and I think it's been working. I've been working with the Speaker of the Assembly in doing the exact same thing. We've worked together on this, and we're seeing I believe, a better process moving forward. So as we move forward, you probably all know, and if you don't, we're going to have a new map this year for the way we pick Congress people, and then next year, as we pick our legislative leaders, our map has changed as well. And that may result in different outcomes. I hope it doesn't. because I think the legislative leadership and the Senate leadership and the Assembly leadership under Democratic control have done an outstanding job in representing the people of the state of New Jersey. But we have to run on our record and what we've accomplished over those years, and a lot of those things have been recognized in the public, and we got to continue to get that messaging across. And when you're talking about politics, it's not all about good policy; it's how you message that public policy. So if you have good government, you want to direct that to the people that will listen to you. I can tell you that part of my new process as Senate President was assembling one of the most diverse leadership teams in the history of the state of New Jersey. Senate Majority Leader Teresa Ruiz, President Pro Tem Sandra Cunningham, Deputy Majority Leader Paul Sarlo, Majority Caucus Leader Nellie Poe, and Majority Whip Troy Singleton, who's closer to this area. So we've got a really diverse team that's helping us formulate the agenda moving forward. So when you look at what we're up to, it's a collection of really outstanding leaders from throughout the state, different areas of the geographic spectrum, made up of men, women, people of color, and even a couple of Caucasian guys. So we've got the whole spectrum covered, and everybody brings a different kind of mindset to what they'd like to see. And we've got an outstanding group of leaders in our leadership team that I just went forward with you, and I think we're hopeful to really solid pieces of legislation going forward. The next and most important thing we're going to be working on is the budget. Always working on the nominations process. One of the things I talked to the doctor before coming in here is really getting people more engaged in what civics is. You'd be surprised how many people have no idea how their state is run and what people do. They generally know who their mayor is, they know who the governor is, they know who the president is, but there are so many different levels of government that no one knows exists. And really do a lot of important decision making for people in New Jersey. I think most, and by and large, these folks get involved in this process with the very highest ideals. And that has been my experience with both sides of the aisle, that people have great ideas, not only is agreeing with them, but they as long as they believe in what they're talking about and are willing to be open-minded to a dialogue, I'm game for that. So people ask me, are you having a good time? I'm like, not yet. It's only been a short period of time, but I'm very honored that the members of my own caucus that I've served with for so many years gave me the honor of choosing me. And I think that people ask you, how did that happen? I think it's just a reflection of many years of keeping your word and doing good work and standing up for what you believe in. And it's really a trust thing because you're picked amongst your own members. And so I was honored to be picked by those members, and hopefully it's I can eclipse Sweeney's record. We'll see. So with that, thank you for having me here. I'm happy to take any questions and talk to you about public policy, politics, or whatever you want to talk about.
Thank you.
I'm staying up here?
You're staying there.
Okay.
People need to see you. I'm just going to ask questions.
This thing is so big, I don't know. This is like a Sweeney size.
Well, you're big in stature, sir. You talked about affordability. These are questions that came in from people when they register online. We asked them to give, if they had a question, and we put some together here. Given the focus on affordability by both sides of the aisle, as you mentioned, is there potential for fundamental tax reform that addresses not just state taxes, but property taxes as well?
Well, some of the bills that I mentioned earlier do address property taxes. Actually, they address them directly. They address direct property tax relief. But when you're going to talk about the other side of the ledger, the expense side, that's generally not something the legislature has a whole heck of a lot of control over. Now, I know that the former Senate President was a big proponent of shared services, and I am not as big a proponent in the way that he was. I believe government should not stand in the way of partnerships. They should do everything they can. Government should not get in the way of partnerships when partnerships are appropriate and they will result in cost savings, regionalization of things. But government somehow has a tendency to get in the way. Yeah, through their regulatory process, through the legislative process, and getting in the way of good solutions. Half of what we do is trying to get people through the regulatory morass of our own government. And that has been created for so many reasons over the years, but cutting through that red tape, as they've said before, is one of the most difficult parts of the job.
Let me follow up and just ask, one of the ideas that continues to come out in part of the political discussion is about regionalization. We have some 60% of all New Jersey municipalities have less than 10,000 people. And this is not to say that an ideal size is the size of Jersey City or Newark, but perhaps more than 4,000 in one town and 2,000 in the next town. Do you see any effort from the legislature on trying to, or either encourage or even mandate that kind of regionalization in order to create cost savings?
I'm a proponent of encouragement without mandating it, and I'll tell you why. Some of the smallest towns, and I have one of the smallest in New Jersey in my district, Winfield Park, is one of the most efficient governments you're going to possibly imagine. Every dime is accounted for because of the size. And sometimes the larger things get, the more waste there is. And so the combination of things is not the panacea that people think it is. Just consolidating things for the purpose of doing that. Now, that's not to say that consolidation is not an outstanding way to save money. In Union County, we recently closed our jail because of jail reform. The census was much lower than we needed. The jail was closed in Union County with the cooperation of the PBAs, and our prisoners were now brought to Essex and Hudson County, a combination of those. It's resulted in a tremendous amount of cost savings for Union County taxpayers, even with paying the per diem rate to house our prisoners over there. And that was something that if they didn't have a local senator like myself to get engaged in, might not have been a possibility because of all the red tape that was put up by the Department of Corrections and many other departments when that consolidation effort was being made. So there are tremendous ways to save money, and when it is appropriate, I think that we need to help that process along. In that instance, we're saving a lot of money. But in others, just trying to shove people together that don't want it is a difficult task. People love their own local government. And if they're willing to pay for it, that's one thing. But when governments want to consolidate certain aspects of it, we've got to help them because there are so many regulations in the way, it makes it hard.
I just want to know, you have a water if you need it.
Thanks.
Okay. We did have several questions about cannabis, sir, and one of them is just the hot topic of this week. Many questions are being raised in regards to the use of cannabis by off-duty police officers. And do you think that there should be strict regulations for off-duty law enforcement and their personal use of cannabis?
No, I don't. That's why I wrote it that way. That was something I wrote myself. And I'll explain to you why. We're setting up two classes of citizens if we go down that road. So where does it end? And this topic was debated. And the legislators that think that it wasn't have conveniently forgotten that this was a topic of much debate during the process. So if we go down that route where we're now regulating people's behavior when they're not working, where does that end? And where do we stop? Why is it just police officers can't utilize this substance when they're not working? Now, there is a strict no tolerance policy for people being on the job in law enforcement under the influence of anything, whether it be opioids that are prescriptionally given to them for other injuries, whether it be alcohol usage, or whether it be cannabis use. Absolutely not. They'll be fired. They'll lose their jobs for that. So where does it end if we go down this road where we talk about police officers should have a no utilization topic? Then what about firemen? What about truck drivers? What about heavy equipment operators? What about every other topic that we want to talk about? And then if we're going to regulate people's behavior when that's normally legalized for everyone else, what else don't we want them to do on their off hours? So we start talking about an infringement on people's lives because they've been lucky enough or gone down in a field of endeavor such as law enforcement. So I have always been a proponent of leave the people alone when they're not working. And so this was a topic that was debated. And sure, people are comfortable with certain aspects of it. If we don't let them utilize marijuana on their off hours, why do we let them drink? And in fact, we see more trouble with off-duty police officers drinking than we do with use of marijuana. Way more behavioral problems and that's not just anecdotal, that's evidence-based. So that topic's been debated. and I don't think it's going to be open for discussion. I understand that it's a topic that got a little bit of press this week because the Attorney General issued guidelines that said that there can be no adverse employment inferences taken against officers who utilize this substance on their own hours. If they utilize it while they're working, they're going to be fired. And that goes for many, many other jobs, all public safety jobs, all transportation jobs. So, I mean, you open up this box where you start regulating people's behavior when they're on their own time. I think that's a very dangerous, slippery slope, and I'm not willing to go down that.
Thank you. We had another question, was a much more localized issue for us down here in Glassboro, and it was about the transportation infrastructure, something that North Jersey has lots of, but here we're a little bit more of a desert. And many in this area have high hopes for the Glassboro to Camden light rail line. Do you see this as a priority for you and the legislature?
I can't answer that question. I don't know. I mean, there's so many different requests that have come in my short tenure as Senate President. I certainly am a big proponent of mass transit. I mean, you think about the rail lines that are really available in North Jersey, and then once you get past Point Pleasant, they're pretty much disappeared until you get all the way back down towards the Philadelphia region. So interconnecting all the areas of New Jersey are extraordinarily important if we want to get people off the roads and utilize mass transit. So sure, it's an important aspect, and I hope that we can fund everything. But I'm not certain as to where that falls in terms of the scope of what we have money for.
One of the things that has come about in the past couple of months is that we now have the Sweeney Center for Public Policy.
I can't wait to see it. Where is it?
Headed by Mark Magyar, my colleague in the back. So many of our top professors at Rowan are now engaged in a multi-year budget work group, trying to develop a 5-year state budget to help with planning, understand, and make proper choices, not just on a year-to-year basis. And they would argue this would be a helpful tool in managing the state's finances. What are your thoughts on moving the state towards a multi-year budget? Is this a good idea?
Well, we've been talking about that. I don't know if you're going to do 5 years, but maybe more than just one at a time. But it depends on a lot of different factors. Obviously, projections change over time. So it's not a simple thing to just say we're going to plan out years and years in advance because we don't know what the revenues are going to look like. We can have a better idea of what the expense side of the ledger sheet is going to look like. But just this quarter alone, we're getting evidence that says that the revenues in the state are going to be better than expected. I mean, Mark just told me $1 billion better. I mean, I don't know where he's got his numbers from, but I hope he's right. But
inside sources.
Okay. But so that lends with the challenges of how you're going to budget that. But of course, we've been talking about that this year and looking at doing and thinking about the budget process, not just this year, but next year. And I know Senate President Sweeney was a big proponent of that over time. And I think this year, the legislature is going to think about next year before it finishes this year, no doubt. Now, I don't know if you're going to be able to look 5 years into the future. But yeah, there's no reason not to plan. But some of the best laid plans don't always come to fruition when things change.
There was a question about the economy. I had several questions about the economy. One of them involved the disconnect between, we seem to see employers telling us that they can't hire enough people. They're desperate to find people to come and work. And at the same time, we have still unemployment rates that are higher than many of our neighbors, that were in the 4.5% to 5% range over the last 2 months. Why the disconnect? Why do we have a high, or at least regionally, high unemployment rate, and yet there are all these employers saying they can't find people?
I should be asking you that question.
It's a public policy question.
It's a
right?
tough question to answer. I mean, anybody can just kind of guess on why that is. I mean, this pandemic has been hopefully a once in a lifetime occurrence, and it seems to be that people have not wanted to come back to work, and there has been a resistance of people coming back to work, particularly in-person working. Now, when it comes to public employees, I've been a big advocate that they have to get back to work, despite there are metrics and some people suggest that people can be more efficient working from home. And in certain instances, that's probably absolutely true. And when it comes to private sector work, private sector is absolutely within their rights to have people work from home. There's a savings associated with that sometimes when it comes to office space. There's metrics to suggest sometimes that they may be more productive from working from home. But the public sector is a different ballgame because people want to see a face at the other end of that phone call, at the other end of that desk when people go to the Motor Vehicle Commission and when they go to the Department of Labor. So, marrying those two ideas that you talked about, the fact that we've got unemployment that may be higher than our neighbors, but then we have suggestions, whether it's scientific based or anecdotal, but you see it all over the news, people can't find workers to do certain jobs, whether they're even highly skilled or even lesser, which are more entry level. That is a question that's, I think, been plaguing government for a while now. But as I think time goes on and the pandemic is further and further in the mirror, you're gonna be dealing with those issues because you're gonna have to either raise wages or get people back out into the workforce.
As a follow-up to that, one of the other questions we had, one of the suggestions out there as to why people are not returning to work is because the lack of affordable childcare. What would you suggest is the state's role in, if any, in helping create an affordable childcare system in New Jersey?
That is a tough question. I remember my parents were divorced and my mother had to go to work and there was no childcare. This gave us a key. So, I was under my brother's care. I had a lot of bruises to show for it, but, it seemed to work out somehow. But I know that Senator Teresa Ruiz has recently come out strongly in a number of different ideas with respect to providing and helping have the state provide affordable health care for people, not health care, child care, because of the difficulties that single-family homes or dual-wage earners have with getting out into the workforce. So there's a role that could be played. I mean, there's roles for everything as long as we have unlimited funds. And that is really where all these great ideas come to a head, which is kind of suggesting what the most prioritized idea is in the finite amount of resources that the state has. And so there is a role to play, but that is an important aspect of it. And that may be part of the reason that people just, and that goes along with making sure our schools are open and open safely so kids can go. That is one of the most trying things that happen for people, having kids home and then them working from home and then having dual roles as school teachers and then also doing their own jobs. And speaking for somebody, I don't know how many people start school. I taught school for a year. Very difficult job. A tough job. So those are a lot of different kind of influences that come to a head.
A question that has nothing to do about finances. Why are you a Democrat?
Well, that's a good question. I'm a Democrat because I believe that the Democratic Party stands for the things that I believe in. For the working person, for giving a people an opportunity to be more than they were when they grew up, to be better than their parents, to give everyone an equal seat at the table, to embrace all cultures and geographies of the state of New Jersey. I've always felt my place in this world was as a Democrat. And the fact that I happen to be a Democratic leader now, to me, is one of the most honorable things that I could possibly achieve. This Democratic Party, I believe, is right on the issues. That's why I'm a member of it. I think that it is, and at least my party, is fiscally conservative and responsible when it comes to being good stewards of the people's money, but is also understanding of people's choices in life, making an opportunity for people of all races, creeds, colors, and sexual orientations, and letting everyone into that party is the reason why I do it. And I believe that this party is generally right on the ideas, that we've been right on the ideas in federal issues as well as state issues. I believe in a woman's right to choose. I believe in opportunities for all, regardless of where they come from or where they've gone. And that's why I'm a member of the Democratic Party.
Thank you. The legislative redistricting effort, as you mentioned, is now complete, excuse me, with new boundaries established for the state's 40 legislative districts. Now, unlike many other states, I know you know this, but I'm sharing with the audience, in other states, many other states, whichever party controls the legislature controls the redistricting process, and we do it differently here in New Jersey. Here, 5 Republicans and 5 Democrats are appointed to a commission. The Chief Justice of the New Jersey Supreme Court selects an 11th member to represent the public and serve as the chair. This year, that 11th member was retired Judge Philip Karchman, and the consensus that he helped forge on the commission resulted in the first legislative map to be approved with bipartisan support. So we had some questions about the process and just what you thought of it. let me run through them and then you can answer. Does New Jersey's current redistricting process work? Does it really work? Is this how it should be done? Is there some better way we should be doing it? Are there any changes that we might consider for 10 years from now?
So first, I wasn't on the Redistricting Commission, but I did have some opportunity to observe what they did for the first time, and I've been in the legislature for a pretty long time. And the process absolutely works. It worked because the basis that it was forged, a map that was agreed to by both sides, which has never happened before. And that's a testament to the members that were on there and to the tiebreaker member, Judge Karchman, bringing people together. And that's what good judges do. I mean, good settlement judges know how to settle a matter. And that was the matter before them, which was the forging of a fair map. So you won't see any party be able to complain that the map was gerrymandered in some way, that the Democratic Party should win or will win no matter what happens. This map is a fair toss-up. And us as Democrats are going to have to fight really hard to remain in the majority because there's a number of different districts that are up for grabs. And there is a scenario where I'm not Senate President Scutari next year, or a year and a half from now, or 2 years almost. And I'm not looking forward to that. Yeah, I think the process works. Obviously, anything can be improved upon, but we've got one of the best processes, I think, in New Jersey in a lot of different ways. First of all, map making. Obviously, we saw that because we had a Republican and Democratic leaders agree on a map, which gives both sides, which they would agree, a fair chance to be the majority party, depending upon their message and their politics for that year.
Wanted to ask a question about COVID here. If you had been governor over the last 2 years, what would you have done differently, if anything, to address the pandemic?
Well, playing Monday morning quarterback with a scenario that's never happened before is pretty unfair. But I will say I thought our governor, in the instance of the pandemic response to COVID-19, did an outstanding job with no playbook, with no understanding of how things could be done. And you could criticize any of the individual decisions. But I mean, in the overall process, he did an outstanding job. He kept the most amount of people safe. He made sure that we had adequate testing where possible. He mandated masks when necessary, mandated vaccinations where necessary, and has eased off the rules. You know, sometimes people wanted to see things happen faster, but opinions, everyone's got a different one. There's an old saying, I'm not going to repeat it here. Opinions are like something everyone's got. So it was an unbelievable area that we were in. And I thought the governor did an outstanding job with it. And wouldn't say that every single decision that he made, I would have made the same. But overall, him and his team that led us through a very trying time did a great job with it.
Thank you. Governor Phil Murphy has said publicly several times that he will not raise taxes in his second term. We were curious, do you think keeping this pledge is even possible, given, as you once mentioned, projections can change? There are so many uncertainties in our economy. Is it even possible to say we're not going to raise taxes in the next 4 years?
Well, he said it, so it's definitely possible. I mean, I don't see it happening. I mean, right now, the economy is churning along, revenues are coming in strong, and there's not going to be a reason to right now. And if things change, obviously things have to be revisited, but there are other options besides raising taxes. So I absolutely believe when Governor Murphy said that, he meant it, and it's probably something that's going to be kept.
When you say other options, you mean cutting spending?
Sure, of course. That's the other option. You either have more money or you spend less money, one or the other. It's not that simple. It's just subtraction and adding. It's a pretty simple process. Everybody says, wow, this is your first budget as Senate President. I'm like, well, I balance my checkbook every year. So just spend, less than you bring in.
It's a lot more zeros at the end.
There's a lot more zeros, but it's still adding and subtracting. There's no, I don't think we use like algebra.
In addition to cannabis, one of the things the Murphy administration has been touting as part of its record, and it's certainly in its re-election campaign, was that new industries were getting created in New Jersey. We now have sports betting. It's been a huge new industry that didn't exist just a few years ago. Cannabis being launched Thursday, an entirely new industry for this state.
That was mine.
Yes, that's all yours. And one of the things that affects folks down here in particular is offshore wind. Because of the workforce development efforts, because of the local, the various manufacturing and the port and other things. How do you see the state's investment in offshore wind? Is that something that needs to be expanded? Is there a real future for this? Because there's still folks who are like, I need to be, energy is energy. We're gonna have to use natural gas, we're gonna have to use oil, coal, all these other things. What's your view on this?
Well, I think they're moving along with wind energy, and that's going to be a reality in the future. There's going to be windmills outside in the ocean next to New Jersey, but I think that's just a part of an overall energy master plan. And the governor's come forward with an energy master plan, but I don't necessarily agree with every aspect of it. I think it's got to be a more well-balanced plan. There are so many different areas in where we get energy. There's already infrastructure for natural gas, and perhaps utilizing that infrastructure with other means is a way in which that we can continue to bridge that movement towards electrification, which is, I think, part of the energy master plan. But there are other different areas of energy production that we're not just going to turn off. We've got to move forward in a responsible way to make sure that some of these other areas, and that includes nuclear, that includes clean energies that are not just electric in moving forward. So there's some of the industry leaders have some great innovative ideas that we've got to listen to and hopefully bring those into that fold as we move forward with electrification. But I think wind has got a real future here in New Jersey. You're no doubt going to see that. I don't think it's going to be everything. It's not going to produce, these windmills are not going to produce all the energy we ever need, but I think it's going to be a large part at some point.
We had a question, a couple questions that related to the business community. And one of them was about the unemployment insurance fund and replenishing it. For the edification of the audience, the state manages an unemployment insurance fund that businesses pay into when unemployment skyrockets, as it did during the pandemic. That fund is depleted, and there are various rules about you've got to replenish it. There's been a cry from many in the business community that the federal dollars that came in, the ARP money, the American Rescue Plan money, should go to offset these over 3 years, several $100 million that are being asked that the businesses have to now pay. What's your take? Should ARP money, should the federal COVID relief money be used to pay as other states have chosen to do?
Well, I've heard those cries. So that's one of the many lists of items that people think we should spend that money on. And that's going to be under active consideration, just like every other place that has put on this 25-page list of asks for that federal money that we have. And that's an area where I want to go back to what you said about 2-year budgeting. I think we're going to be looking at a 2-year spending plan for some of those monies, and the unemployment fund is an area that may get some of that. How much of it I do not know, and that's a collaborative process with the governor and the state assembly and where those monies go. And I can tell you that there's been special language that was existing in JBOC, which was taken out, which is going to definitely go back.
JBOC being the Joint Budget Oversight Commission.
Correct. That is made up of members of the Assembly and Senate that decides where some of this money is going to be spent. That's going back in. I guarantee that. And
so again, excuse me, Senator, just to clarify, in the governor's proposed budget, legislative oversight over how the ARP money was spent was taken out. Legislative leaders have made a commitment that they're going to put that back in, if I'm understanding you correctly.
Yes. I'm not the first one to say it. I know the speaker said it. I know the budget chair said it. I'm saying it as well. That's going to go back in. And so because we feel very strongly that we should have a role to play in the spending of this unprecedented federal dollars. And we're going to make sure that, that we have our opinions heard and meted out in that process. So yeah, I mean, that's an area that's going to get consideration for spending, because people say that's direct property tax. That's direct tax relief to small business owners and large business owners that are paying into that fund. And if it's not put in there, then they're going to have to make up the difference at some point in time. So that's on the list.
Let me shift for a second to higher education. obviously something important to the folks around here. How would you see, what is the future for making college more affordable?
I just got all the ideas in the world from the president. He just gave me a whole tutorial on how to do it. So I think some of those ideas that the president spoke to about as well are outstanding. I mean, utilizing the county colleges more and more in cooperation with the state colleges, trying to keep as many students here in New Jersey as we can, especially since we are one of the best public educations that people have from K through 12, keeping them in the state rather than seeing them go out and leave and not ever come back. Are important things that we've got to make sure that we do. There's, as we talked about earlier, there's only two ways to make things affordable: either give them more money or charge them less.
Another one of the asks from the business community has been about the Anchor program. The Anchor program being a property tax relief program proposed by the governor in his budget. Businesses have argued that they pay almost 50% of all property taxes in the state, but the Anchor program proposed by the governor in his budget is specifically dedicated just towards renters and homeowners and not businesses. Should that be changed?
Well, that could certainly be under consideration, but most of those business owners own properties too, I imagine. they're property tax payers as well, but that's the first I've actually heard that, believe it or not. So. Anytime you expand, that's a very expensive program already that the governor's put forward, which we'd like to be part of. But, expanding it more is going to cost more money. And that's going to come from somewhere.
I'd like to ask you about the November election, which you've obviously said elections have consequences. What did the results of the November election teach you about the political climate in New Jersey and nationally?
I don't be ready for anything, because I wasn't going to stand here. I can tell you that as Senate President. So, it depends on how you look at it. In New Jersey, in certain geographic areas, and if you speak to Senate President Steve Sweeney, and probably the election results reflect that, there was some engagement of voters that you hadn't seen before, and numbers were larger in some areas. And New Jersey has traditionally been a Democratic state, but our governor eked out a 3-point victory. So some of these national trends, and I say it this way, and I've said this before, and I probably have never said it publicly. I think whenever a political party gets too off mainstream, they pay a price for it. So when the Democrats, in some way, you talk about liberal or progressive versus conservative viewpoints, or right or left, and you hear people that are loud on those areas, loud from the left, loud from the right, and then there's this kind of mainstream America, which I'm a believer is where most people are. And whenever you get too far afield of those areas, and whether that's actual policy or it's the way in which a campaign is run. And I thought that the campaign in New Jersey was almost a primary election that was run instead of a general election. I think that was reflective at the polls, a much closer election than anybody had anticipated. I think polling in New Jersey has changed dramatically. And I think as a political leader, not only am I the Democratic, the Senate President from New Jersey, I'm also the Democratic Chairman of the County of Union, which has been the third largest Democratic plurality in New Jersey for a few years running now, even though we're not one of the largest counties. We see us understanding politics and the needs of our voters and our constituents more from focus groups and personal interviews than we do from polling. Polling has gotten, somehow polling has not been as accurate as it had been up till just very recently. So we're going to have to find out why that is. But we've still been able to identify how people are going to vote, why they're voting a certain way. So the elections have consequences. The Democrats have maintained control in New Jersey. We lost a few seats here and there. The governor was reelected, which has not happened in decades. So that was a reflection of the strength of the Democratic Party in New Jersey. But we lost the Senate President, which is a humongous deal. And that was reflective of some of the things that we didn't see. And polls did not accurately reflect that there was an energized group of folks with Republican leanings. And mind you, I'm I personally have an understanding that didn't understand how good they had it in the 3rd District, quite frankly. And they probably will, hopefully not too much, but they probably will going forward. So it taught me that, you can never let your guard down, and you want to continue to make sure that your message is on point with what the voters want to see.
You referenced working with people across the aisle earlier in your remarks. Why, in your mind, why has civility seemed to disappear from public discourse, and how can we restore it?
So I did a whole program at Monmouth University with Senator Oroho and Senator Gopal about civility in politics in New Jersey, and I don't think it has. I have to tell you, not local, at least not at the state Senate level. I can't speak for the other house. I can't speak for local politics. I can't speak for the federal government. I can tell you from my perspective as a senator for the past 18 years that the discourse in that house has been that of professionalism and collegiality and cooperation. And I hope that it's continued to do so. We've got a great leader on the other side, and Senator Steve Oroho, who leads the Senate Republicans. And hopefully I'll be the same type of leader on the Democratic side, and working together to find common sense solutions for people of the state of New Jersey, regardless of where it comes from, regardless of party affiliation. We want to do the best for our citizens. And hopefully if the Democrats can take a little more credit, that would be great too, since it's our leadership. But, working other side of the aisle has been a thing that I've been known for and will continue to be known for. So the civility breakdown that you see, I tell you, I think a lot of it is driven by social media more than ever. I see that all the time because it's a lot easier to say nasty things over the internet than it is to say to someone's face. And people say things in a more emotional response when the people are not right up against each other. And some people do that too, and that doesn't lead to good results either. But the social media of our country, of this world, has changed the dynamic of politics, the way in which we can communicate with the electorate and the way people connect and communicate with others. And that has, I believe, changed the discourse of society.
You've been around politics for a number of years now, starting very young. Leaving civility aside, what else disappoints you about New Jersey political life?
Not much. I love it. Where else can you get the opportunity? A kid from Linden grew up from divorced parents with no money and could be the president of the Senate. Nowhere. I mean, to me, there's not a day that I don't go down to Trenton and look at the Gold Dome and walk into this unbelievable office that they let me sit in, that I'm borrowing from Senator Sweeney, and get an opportunity to make decisions on people's lives. Nowhere else. So, I mean, I've had precious few disappointments. Everyone has frustrations in the legislative process. I mean, it took me 18 years to legalize marijuana, but I got it done. So the wonderment that I enjoy being in politics and being in government, to me, never ceases to amaze me. It's the opportunity of a lifetime for me. And anybody that serves in the Senate and the Assembly that doesn't understand that, they should leave. Because I don't know too many people that wouldn't take that opportunity. So the fact that we have the opportunity to sit and talk and decide on how society is going to play out in New Jersey, to me, is one of the greatest honors in the world. So I've had precious few disappointments with the political process in my lifetime. Obviously, we've all had frustrations, but disappointments I've had very few.
Our final question is one we ask everybody, and it's about advice to young people. Our traditional concluding question is this: what do you know now that you wish you knew when you were starting out?
I didn't know how long legalizing marijuana was going to take. I probably wouldn't have tried that. It takes years to get to know how to get things done. Even, I was a senator at a very young age, and, people think that means something, and it does, the title in and of itself. But working within the process, building the personal relationships, to me, is the most important aspect of politics and of life, quite frankly. The interpersonal relationships that you gain, the trust that you make with people, the relationships that you build are the things that help you get things done. Without colleagues, without collegiality, without friends, without supporters, you don't become Senate President. And you certainly don't get any monumental pieces of legislation passed. Nobody can do it on their own, no matter what you think, no matter how smart you think you are, no matter how many ideas you think you know the answers to. you do not do it alone. This is a collaborative process, and without others buying into the arguments that you make, you can't get anything done. You're just shouting in the wind. So working with people in all walks of life and across the aisle is the only way to get significant things done in politics.
On that note, let's thank Senator President Scutari. A wonderful and insightful conversation. Let me just say, I want to thank all of you for coming out tonight. This is our actual last installment of our public speaker series for this academic year. We are incredibly proud that, as you have done, we've really tried to help raise the level of political discourse here in New Jersey. And so, until we meet all again in September, thank you. Everybody have a safe trip home. Good night.